The wind howls across the Archuleta Mesa, carrying the scent of dry sage and something sharp, metallic. In the town of Dulce, New Mexico, the locals keep their heads down. They know the rhythm of the night. It starts with the wind, but it does not end there. At exactly 3 a.m., the air changes. The wind dies, leaving a vacuum of silence that is immediately filled by a low-frequency vibration. It is a hum that travels through the ground. It is not the sound of a storm. It is the sound of the earth being hollowed out. Every resident in Dulce knows the feeling. The coffee in the mug ripples. The glass in the window frames rattles against the wood. The dogs stop barking and crawl beneath the porches. It is a mechanical, rhythmic pulse that defies the natural order of the high desert. It is the sound of something massive moving beneath the crust. They do not look out their windows when the hum begins. They turn off the lights, lock the doors, and wait for the sun to rise. The hum was only the beginning. By the mid-1970s, the terror took a physical form that the ranchers of Dulce could not ignore. It started in the pastures. A rancher would head out at dawn, expecting to find his herd grazing in the sagebrush. Instead, he found them lying in the dust, motionless. The silence of the desert was absolute. He approached the first carcass, a heifer, and knelt in the dirt. There were no signs of a struggle, no trampled grass, no blood spattered on the dry earth. He reached out to touch the hide, but pulled his hand back. The incision was perfect. A clean, straight line ran from the jaw to the flank, as if cut by a laser. The organs were gone, removed with a level of precision that defied any known predator. He stood up and scanned the horizon, looking for prints, for tire tracks, for any sign of a vehicle. There was nothing. The ground was undisturbed, as if the animal had simply been dropped from the sky or materialized in the middle of the field. He walked to the next body, then the next. He looked up at the empty, cloudless sky, then back at the lifeless cattle. The fear was no longer just a feeling. It was a cold, hard fact lying in the dust. Miles away from the silent pastures of Dulce, Paul Benowitz stood on his porch in Albuquerque. His telescope was fixed on the dark horizon of the Archuleta Mesa. He was not looking for stars. He was looking for the impossible. Night after night, he watched the sky. He saw lights emerge from the blackness, not like falling meteors or distant aircraft, but with a deliberate, haunting intelligence. They danced over the mesa in erratic patterns, sharp turns, sudden stops. Benowitz gripped the cold metal of his telescope, his knuckles white. He tracked their movements, recording every coordinate in a leather-bound notebook. He searched for a logical explanation. He checked flight paths, weather patterns, and satellite trajectories. Nothing matched. The lights were silent, cold, and persistent. He watched them hover over the mesa, illuminating the scrub brush with a pale, unnatural glow. The realization hit him with the weight of a physical blow. These were not atmospheric phenomena. They were controlled. Benowitz moved his focus from the lens to the dial. His study in Albuquerque became a sanctuary of humming electronics and tangled wires. He spent his nights hunched over a radio receiver, sweeping through frequencies that the military claimed were empty. He sought the source of the lights. He turned the knob, listening to the white noise of the atmosphere, a constant, rushing static that filled the room. Then, he hit a dead zone. The static vanished. In its place, a rhythmic, metallic clicking emerged. It was not a broadcast. It was not a weather balloon. It was a sequence. He grabbed a pen, his hand shaking as he began to transcribe the pattern. Dot, dash, pause. Dot, dot, dash. The pulses were precise, repeating in cycles that defied the randomness of natural interference. He adjusted the gain, trying to sharpen the signal, but the sound only grew more insistent, vibrating through the desk and into his fingertips. He realized then that he was not listening to a transmission from Earth. He was now listening to the heartbeat of an invasion, and he was the only one who knew the frequency. The rumors that had haunted the fringes of the desert finally found a voice. Philip Schneider stepped onto the platform, the air in the room thick with the weight of his arrival. He did not start with theories or radio frequencies. He stood before the crowd, his hands visibly trembling, his gaze fixed on the back wall. The silence in the hall was absolute. He began to speak, his voice strained, recounting a reality that shattered the comfort of the status quo. He did not ask for belief. He demanded recognition. Schneider reached for his collar, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He pulled the fabric aside, exposing the skin of his upper torso. A jagged, puckered scar cut across his chest. A deep, uneven trench of white tissue that looked like a map of a violent, forgotten encounter. He traced the edge of the mark with a shaking finger, the skin around it tight and discolored. This was not a story of lights in the sky. The crowd leaned in, the collective breath of the room held in check. He looked at them, his eyes wide, and spoke of 1,979. The drilling project in 1979 was meant to be a standard survey of the mesa's deep crust. Schneider and his crew operated the heavy machinery, the rhythmic pounding of the drill bit against solid rock echoing through the tunnel. They were miles beneath the surface, encased in granite and silence. Then, the rhythm changed. The drill bit, usually met with the stubborn resistance of stone, suddenly plunged forward as if it had hit a pocket of nothingness. The motor whined, spinning freely in the void. Schneider signaled for an immediate halt. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, the air began to move. A draft, cold enough to frost their breath, rushed up from the borehole. It carried a thick, cloying stench of rotting sulfur, a chemical rot that clung to the back of their throats. The crew stood frozen. They realized then that they were standing on the threshold of a cavern that should not have existed, a massive, hollow space. The flashlights swept across the cavern floor, but the light seemed to die before hitting the far wall. Schneider stood at the edge of the breach, his boots crunching on loose shale. The sulfurous air grew denser, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that rattled the teeth in his skull. Then, the darkness shifted. It was not a trick of the light. The shadows themselves began to peel away from the jagged rock face, detaching from the gloom with a fluid, liquid grace. One by one, they stepped into the narrow beam of the work lights. They stood 7 feet tall, their frames thin and unnaturally elongated. Their skin possessed a translucent, gray quality, stretched tight over bone, pulsing with a faint, sickly luminescence. They moved without sound, their feet making no contact with the stone floor, gliding forward as if the air itself were a medium they controlled. The crew stood paralyzed, their hands locked onto their tools, their breathing hitched in their chests. The entities did not rush, they did not shout. They simply occupied the space, their presence, an absolute negation of everything the men understood about biology and physics. The shock hit the crew like a physical blow. The silence shattered when Schneider reached for his sidearm. The metal felt cold and heavy in his grip as he leveled it at the nearest gray figure. He did not wait for a command. He squeezed the trigger. The report of the shot was deafening in the enclosed cavern, a sharp crack that echoed against the cavern walls. The bullet hit the entity in the chest, but there was no spray of blood, no recoil from the impact. The figure barely shuddered, its momentum unbroken. Schneider fired again, then again, the muzzle flashes strobing through the sulphurous haze. The rest of the crew snapped out of their stupor, their own weapons rising. Lead tore through the air, striking the gray forms with a dull, wet thud. Some of the projectiles seemed to pass through the translucent skin, while others sparked. The entities did not scream. They did not retreat. They simply continued their advance, their movements becoming faster, more erratic, as the air filled with gunpowder. The cavern became a chaotic theater of light and noise, the rhythmic pounding of gunfire clashing against the absolute, predatory silence of the figures. Schneider backed away, his finger locked on the trigger, watching as his bullets failed to stop the tide of gray. The rhythm of the gunfire changed. Schneider adjusted his aim, focusing on the center mass of the lead figure. He emptied the remainder of his magazine into the creature's chest. This time, the resistance gave way. The entity stumbled, its legs buckling as if the bones had suddenly turned to water. It hit the cavern floor with a heavy, wet slap. Beside it, another figure took a direct hit to the shoulder and collapsed in a heap. The crew stopped firing, their weapons lowering. There was no flesh to inspect, no wounds to bandage. The fallen entities were liquefying. Their gray, translucent skin bubbled and ruptured, melting into a thick, viscous black sludge that pooled across the stone. The substance hissed, releasing a pungent, chemical odor. It did not look like biological decay. It looked like a machine failing, a synthetic construct returning to its base state. The silence that followed the gunfire was heavier than before. The men stood frozen, staring at the black pools spreading toward their boots. The spell of horror broke when a new sound tore through the cavern. It was not a voice, but a high-pitched, grinding vibration that rattled the very marrow of Schneider's bones. More shadows detached themselves from the walls further down the tunnel, moving with a fluid, predatory speed that defied human anatomy. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The fight was over before it had truly begun. He turned, his boots slipping on the slick, uneven stone, and began to run. Behind him, the air filled with the frantic shouts of his colleagues, followed abruptly by wet, tearing sounds and sharp, agonized cries that were cut short. He did not look back. He pushed his body to its limit, his lungs burning as he inhaled the thick, sulfurous air. Every stride was a gamble on the darkness, his hands brushing against the jagged rock walls to maintain his balance. The tunnel seemed to stretch, narrowing as he sprinted away from the slaughter. The screams of his team echoed against the ceiling, growing fainter as he plunged deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. He was the only one left moving. He was the only one left breathing. The rebellion had failed in a matter of seconds, leaving him to carry the weight of the nightmare back toward the surface. The terror did not end with the escape. It only found a new voice. Thomas Edwin Costello stepped into the light of the public record, carrying the weight of a secret that defied conventional logic. He held the key to the abyss, a clearance level designated as Ultra 7, granting him access to the architecture of the nightmare. He began to draw. His hands moved with a cold, mechanical precision, tracing lines across parchment that formed the blueprint of a subterranean empire. He did not describe a single bunker. He mapped 7 distinct levels of hell, carved deep into the crust of the earth. Each layer served a purpose, a descending spiral of cold, calculated experimentation. He spoke of the transition from the surface world to the depths, where the laws of nature were rewritten by unseen hands. The mapping process was a slow, methodical unspooling of the truth. He laid out the corridors, the ventilation shafts, and the fortified checkpoints that separated the human world from the masters of the base. Costello traced the path downward, level by level, preparing to expose the horrors hidden within the dark. Costello's pen stopped moving as he reached the 4th level. The tone of his voice dropped, losing its analytical edge, replaced by the weight of a man who had seen the impossible. Level 4 was not a place of storage or transit. It was a laboratory of biological engineering. He described the moment he stepped through the heavy, reinforced doors into a massive, cavernous hall. The air here was different, thick, humid, and smelling of ozone and sterile chemicals. Before him, the darkness was punctuated by a rhythmic, low-frequency hum. As his eyes adjusted, the true scale of the facility revealed itself. Rows of glass cylinders stretched into the gloom, disappearing into the far reaches of the chamber. They were massive, floor-to-ceiling structures, each one pulsing with a pale, bioluminescent light. Inside every cylinder, a thick, viscous fluid bubbled, churning with a slow, deliberate motion. The sound of the liquid hitting the glass walls was the only thing breaking the silence of the hall. Costello moved closer, his breath hitching as he peered through the translucent surface. Suspended within the bubbling depths, he saw the shapes. The nightmare had taken physical, breathing shape. Costello pressed his palm against the cold glass, the vibration of the bubbling fluid rattling his bones. The creatures inside were a mockery of anatomy. He watched as one drifted closer to the surface, its limbs unfolding in the viscous current. The arms were wrong. They stretched far beyond the natural reach of a human frame, the joints bent at angles that defied skeletal structure. Where elbows should have been, There were only smooth, cartilaginous hinges, elongated and pale. The fingers were thin, needle-like extensions that twitched rhythmically, scraping against the inner wall of the cylinder. He looked toward the face, or what remained of it. The features were blurred, as if the flesh had been molded by a sculptor who had never seen a human. The jawline was distended, pulling the skin tight over bone that seemed to be constantly shifting. There were no ears, only small, recessed pits. Every movement was a slow, agonizing ripple, a total violation of the biological blueprint. These were not beings born of nature. Costello turned away from the vats, his boots clicking against the hard, metallic floor. Beyond the glass cylinders lay a different kind of chamber. The lighting here was harsh, flickering with a sickly, yellow intensity. He stopped before a series of iron-barred cages that lined the wall. These were not for animals. Inside each enclosure, a person sat on the cold concrete. They did not look up. They did not move. Their eyes were wide, fixed on points in the air that did not exist, vacant and devoid of recognition. Costello stepped closer, the metal grating cold against his fingertips. He saw the skin of their arms and legs, mapped with a network of dark, purple bruises. Every inch of exposed flesh was marked by needle tracks and jagged surgical incisions that had never properly healed. Some held their hands to their chests, fingers trembling in a slow, involuntary tremor. The air in the cage area was stagnant, heavy with the metallic tang. Costello watched the rise and fall of their chests, the only sign that they were still tethered to the world of the living. A rhythmic clicking echoed from the far end of the corridor, distinct from the hum of the machinery. Costello pressed his back against the cold wall, sliding into the shadow of a support pillar. He held his breath, his pulse thumping against his throat. Two figures emerged from the gloom. They moved with a fluid, predatory efficiency that made the surrounding air feel heavy. Their gait was not a walk. It was a silent glide, the soles of their feet barely disturbing the dust on the floor. Each step was perfectly measured. They passed within feet of his hiding spot. Their skin possessed a dull gray sheen that seemed to absorb the flickering light. One stopped, its long, slender fingers tracing the edge of a control console. The movement was precise, devoid of hesitation. It turned its head, the neck rotating with a mechanical smoothness, and scanned the rows of cages. They were the masters of this subterranean silence, and every action they took confirmed that the humans were nothing more than biological assets. Costello looked at the heavy blast doors, their edges warped by intense heat and impact. These were not defensive measures built by the entities. They were the remnants of a human barricade. The 1979 incident was never a mere exploration gone wrong. It was a desperate, full-scale rebellion. He traced the deep gouges in the reinforced steel, evidence of a frantic attempt to hold the line against an impossible force. The floor was littered with spent casings and shattered equipment, left exactly where they fell when the resistance collapsed. The humans had fought for every meter of these tunnels, pushing forward with everything they had, only to be systematically dismantled. The rebellion had been a total failure. The entities had crushed the uprising and reclaimed the depths with brutal efficiency. Humanity had lost its grip on the crust of its own planet, and the entities had solidified their hold, turning the deep earth into an impenetrable fortress. Above ground, the official narrative remains a masterpiece of omission. Government spokespeople stand before cameras, their voices steady, dismissing the tremors in Dulce as routine geological shifts or minor military testing. They point to maps that show nothing but empty rock. They release documents filled with redacted lines and technical jargon designed to bore the public into indifference. Yet, the physical reality refuses to align with the ink on the page. In the local monitoring stations, the needles on the seismographs jump in patterns that no natural fault line could produce. The vibrations are rhythmic, mechanical, and deliberate. When a journalist asks about the metallic scent drifting from the mesa, the response is a rehearsed silence, followed by a pivot to standard maintenance. They treat the base as a ghost, a phantom that exists only in the minds of the paranoid, but the ground does not lie. The government maintains a wall of denial, a facade constructed to keep the truth buried. They operate in the shadow of their own lies. In the town of Dulce, the hum is a permanent resident. It is not a sound one hears with the ears, but a vibration felt in the marrow of the bones. At 3 in the morning, when the wind dies down and the mesa falls into total stillness, the floorboards of every home begin to tremble. The residents do not call the authorities. They do not report the tremors to the local news. They simply lock their doors, pull their blankets tight, and wait. They know the source. They know that deep beneath the sagebrush and the red dirt, the glass cylinders are still bubbling. The needles are still piercing skin. The entities are still moving through the halls with their predatory, silent grace. The experiments did not end with the failed rebellion. They merely moved deeper. Every rattle of a window pane, every sudden shift in the soil is a reminder that the facility is functioning at full capacity. The town lives in a state of perpetual, quiet vigilance. They walk the streets, buy their groceries, all while standing on the ceiling of a nightmare. The ground continues to groan under the weight of the work below. The people of Dulce have learned that the only way to survive is to pretend they do not hear the earth screaming. Stop searching the night sky for signs of arrival. The lights dancing over the mesa are not visitors from distant galaxies. They are local, terrestrial, and immediate. The truth is not hidden in the stars. It is buried directly beneath our feet, encased in the crust of the earth. Every tremor that rattles the foundation of the town is a pulse from the deep. It is a heartbeat from an empire that never left. We walk on the surface, oblivious, while the machinery of the subterranean nightmare grinds on. The silence of the desert is a lie. The next time the ground shifts, the next time the earth groans under the weight of the work below, pay attention. The cracks will widen, the dark will rise, and what lies beneath will finally be exposed to the light.
Thank you for watching Frequency XO Productions. And remember, never give up on yourself.